Are we live? We're live.
Yep. Yay.
Well, there's nothing like breaking news, Elisa.
Oh my gosh. 5 minutes before we're supposed to go
like
live.
5 minutes beforehand, has probably some of the most important immigration news in months. Well, maybe not the most important. Well, it's pretty damn important. But
Greg, this is your fault because you said it was a quiet week.
You did.
We're talking about it's like, what should we prioritize? There was like, there's not. I mean, there are important things, but there was not as much as last week.
Yeah.
Now there is.
Now there is.
All right. So, Elisa, do you want to summarize what just happened?
Well, actually, really quickly before we get to the good stuff, I just want to make a quick public service announcement for our listeners who are maybe involved in the H-1B lottery this year. Please make sure you submit all your documentation. It's quickly coming to an end. You need to get your stuff to your attorney now so you can file. Just want to throw that out there.
Thanks, Julia. And now
we have scofflaw clients who are dragging their feet.
Yeah, there's always a few. So if you're one of those out there, please make sure you get your stuff in. It's important.
It is.
You want to make the deadline, and there's some things you just can't speed up in the H-1B process, so it's important.
All right, now on to the breaking news.
Breaking. I got an email.
I'm going to make a new a new banner.
Okay.
All right.
I got an email just a few minutes ago that the White House at long last has issued the so-called travel ban that we thought was maybe coming back in March. It's similar to what the New York Times originally reported, but the list of countries, there's only 19 countries on it. Not the rumored
43 in the original list.
Yeah, not the rumored 43. It's much more pared down than what was originally reported, which is something that I kind of expected to happen once the White House held this up for as long as they did. We knew that they were making edits to it. I am going to go through and give you the list of countries that are affected. There are 2 tiers of countries, as was rumored to be the case. There's not 3 tiers, only 2 tiers of countries.
And they don't have color codes.
No colors. The first tier of countries for which there is a total ban on entry, and we'll get in. There are exceptions that we will get into. Bear with us because literally this dropped into my inbox about 7 minutes before we went live. We did a really quick read through. We'll be able to provide a much deeper dive at a later date on our LinkedIn posts, on Blue Sky, on X, all these different places. But please bear, we're going to do our best tonight to go over what is truly breaking news. So the top tier 12 countries that have a near total ban on entry into the U.S. are Afghanistan, Burma, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. And the ban applies to both immigrants and non-immigrants. Again, we're going to go over some of the exceptions in a few minutes. The second tier of countries, of which there are 7, have much more truncated bans, and they essentially apply to immigrants, which we think means people who received immigrant visas abroad, but who have not yet made their first entry into the United States, and also to B1, B2, F, M, and J visa holders. And the 7 countries that have those restrictions are Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. And so that is the total list of countries at this point. Those 19, 12 in the first group with a total ban, and 7 in the second group with a much more limited ban on non-immigrants to the United States. The exceptions, of which there are many, and this is where it may be a little difficult for us to do a real deep dive tonight on how all of these are going to apply. But of course, we did go through this in the first Trump administration, so we have some idea. The bans apply to foreign nationals of the designated countries who are outside the United States on the applicable effective date of the proclamation, which is going to be June 9th, which is Monday. So this proclamation is not in effect today. It goes into effect on Monday, June 9th, probably like right as the clock strikes 12
But that's really important because in the travel bans from the first Trump administration, when they would announce those, they would make them effective almost immediately. So there was no opportunity for people to get back into the country. So if you happen to be from one of these countries and you are affected by this, if you can get back in over the weekend, then you should presumably be able to avoid it.
The other thing, so you're outside the United States on Monday and you do not have a valid visa as of Monday. So if you're from one of the affected countries and you don't have a visa already by Monday, now there's only a couple of business days left in the week. So if we have folks that are outside the United States who are waiting visa issuance after an interview or something, that could mean the difference between getting here over the weekend and not. So that could be a really important time.
Are you optimistic?
What's that?
Are you optimistic about those people getting their visas at this point?
I don't think anybody at the State Department is going to be rushing to issue those visas right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Exceptions to these proclamations, right? There are always exceptions. And so it's really important to listen for these. And by the way, I should mention that the executive order that created this ban is available publicly on the White House's website under in the briefing section.
You don't want to, if you don't want to look for it, take a screenshot of this, and I just made a short.
If you want to read along, sometimes it helps to see it and read it. I don't know. I'm kind of like that works for me. So you may want to go check it out for yourself. But the exceptions: lawful permanent residents of the United States. So these are our green card holders, right? If you are outside the United States on Monday, but you already have a green card, you should be able to return to the United States. That's really, really important. I know I'm going to get about 1,000 emails about I'm, traveling right now and this happened. If you have a green card, you are not affected by this proclamation. If you are a dual national of a country designated under the proclamation and a country that wasn't designated, you can enter. So, for example, if you were a dual national of Venezuela and Canada or something like that, your Canadian citizenship will save you. That was also the case. Both of these exceptions applied under the travel bans in the first Trump administration. So they carry those over. If you're on a diplomatic visa in the A, C, G, NATO categories, this does not apply to you. Interestingly, and this was one of the reasons that we had heard that the travel ban was going to be delayed, is they exempt any member or athlete or member of an athletic team, including coaches, persons performing a necessary support role, and immediate relatives, which means that the spouses of the players and the coaches and all those folks, traveling to the World Cup, Olympics, or other major sporting event as determined by the Secretary of State. So the World Cup and the Olympics are specifically named.
I just know how the phone call went. Somebody from FIFA and somebody from the International Olympic Committee put a call into the White House and said, you can kiss the World Cup goodbye. You can kiss the Olympics goodbye that are coming up in 2028 if you mess around with athletes.
Now, interestingly, it provides an exception for the athletes and their families and the coaches and the supports. It does not provide immediately an exception for fans, for visitors from those countries to come specifically to the United States for these events. So that will be an interesting wrinkle. Moving along, immediate family immigrant visas with clear and convincing evidence of identity and family relationship. For example, DNA. I don't know how you prove a DNA relationship with your spouse, but that is for another time, I guess. But basically, we talked about a few minutes ago how these bans apply to immigrants and non-immigrants. And I, for lack of any other definition, am defining an immigrant as somebody who's received their immigrant visa, but has not yet entered the U.S. But if you're an immediate relative category, like the spouse of, or parent of a U.S. citizen, and IR5, so it's IR1, CR1, IR2, CR2, that's immediate relative and conditional resident, and then IR5s, which are parents of adult U.S. citizens, with clear and convincing evidence of identity and family relationships. So for parents of U.S. citizens, they might require a DNA test proving the genetic relationship. With spouses, obviously, unless the rules have changed, that would not really be advisable. But at any rate, I'm sure there will, spouses, it's kind of easy to show the relationship with a marriage certificate potentially. Adoption. So people who are being adopted from those countries are exempt. Afghan special immigrant visas are exempt, which is interesting because I feel like this administration has done everything to not want people we've helped to come to the U.S. Special immigrant visas for United States government employees and immigrant visas for ethnic and religious minorities facing persecution in Iran. And I have some suppositions about that, but I don't know. I don't exactly know enough detail to know which groups they're talking about or why they specifically picked out Iran to protect their ethnic and religious minorities as opposed to any of these other countries.
Were Jays from Iran covered?
Yes, everybody from Iran is covered. So we had doctors from Iran for a few years, and now that pipeline must be again.
The doctors are going to be.
You know who's not on this list?
They're already in trouble under the FMJ. Well, we're going to get to that in a minute. The FMJ.
You know who's not on this list, but was on the list last time? Well, actually, two countries come to mind: North Korea, and Syria. Now we just lifted.
Syria's our friend again.
We just lifted sanctions on Syria, and prior to the Trump 1.0 travel ban, I worked with a tremendous number of Syrian doctors.
Yeah, it was a top 10 country for doctors.
Yeah, and then it stopped completely for for several years, and now I'm starting to see some more Syrian physicians in my client base, and so that's very interesting that the ban does not apply to Syria at all. They're not on either list.
Yeah, the North Korea though that one is amusing to me on what they did and what changed in North Korea that they're no longer a worry.
Yeah, I think the one here, the one country on the list that really, other than Afghanistan, that I think is really challenging is Haiti. They have announced a total ban on the immigration of people from Haiti. The U.S. has already shut down refugee admissions. Our embassy there is closed. There are children of U.S. citizens there. There are, spouses of U.S. citizens who are stuck there who can't get here because the embassy wasn't operating and the State Department didn't designate an official alternate post for them to process at. And now we've said, you know what? You can't come here at all. And that's just the whole island is that side of the island is a humanitarian disaster.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that are eligible for immigrant visas from Haiti. There's a big Haitian population in the U.S. who are U.S. citizens that are eligible to sponsor family members, and now they are out of luck for a while, at least probably for the next 3 years, 3.5 years, or how many? Are we counting days yet? No comment.
Hours.
We have a question, and I think it's interesting because you actually mentioned it last week, Greg, on the live stream, how a lot of exceptions will later come up for doctors. When these things roll out, they seem to forget about doctors. And so we have a question now asking about H-1B doctors or fellows from Venezuela
So H-1Bs from Venezuela should be okay because they're on the limited visa ban list. So it's only B1, B2, FM, and J. So folks who are from Venezuela who have H-1Bs should be able to enter the United States still. And I see that Peggy has added a question about F1 Haitians. If somebody is here in the United States already,
they're not banned.
They should not leave the United States if at all possible, because if they leave, it's going to be very challenging to come back.
Yeah,
F1
that's lesson one is don't leave. And then also if you are FM or J, then you're going to want to look at if you're a sponsor of J doctors in particular, but other categories. The way this is looking is that if you can bring them in an H-1B or another visa category, you can get around it.
The second question that Peggy asked was about F1 Haitians who are here. And my answer for them is that if they're here, they're okay to stay as long as they have status. If they leave, I fear that an F1 student from Haiti is not going to be able to get a visa to come back to the States, absent some exception that applies. And the exceptions are very limited. I don't think I finished going through them. Hold on. Maybe I did. Yeah, I did. I finished going through them. The government says they're going to review this proclamation every 180 days and tweak it. So that signals that perhaps some countries get removed. It
just means they're going to add more.
Or they can add more or both. So be aware of that this is not a done deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this does resemble a lot the Trump 1.0 travel bans, but unfortunately, it resembles the Trump the third one that actually was upheld by the Supreme Court. It more resembles that than it did the prior two that were struck down. So from a lawsuit perspective, this is a tough one. I do assume that somebody is going to be running to the courthouse in the next day or so.
Yeah, it's a loser though, because the Supreme Court made it relatively straightforward for the administration. All they have to do is just kind of, document either they're not taking people back or they're not cooperating in international investigations and such. My guess is that, in terms of the populations, there's not that many visas being granted for Afghans at this point, except for immigrant visas because of people that were already here and already have gotten longer term status. Burma, a lot of these. Well, here's the thing. Look at this list, and how many of these countries have TPS that are being yanked?
Yep.
So we've got, Afghanistan, we've got Burma, we've got Haiti. I don't know if Sudan. It's only South Sudan that has it. We got Venezuela. We got Cuba. So like what they're doing is they're trying to yank their legal status in the U.S. and force them to leave, and then banning them from being able to come back in. So much for Kristi Noem and her, like, all you have to do is get on a plane. We'll give you $1,000, and then you can come back the legal way.
Mm-hmm.
Except you can't if you're covered under one of these.
Yeah.
And on most of the categories, you could come back in for a lot of these people. Most of these people, probably their only option was to come in on an immigrant visa, and that's off the list. So you kind of can see how these policies play into each other.
Greg, do you know if I share in the little chat we have, can I share, I'm going to share the travel ban because somebody had asked about the information about the sporting events. I think I can post that right in this comment. And,
wait, you want to post a link to the White House page?
Yeah.
This is it. I did a shortcut of it. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's up there. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know if you wanted to put it in the chat. Click it.
Yeah, you can put it in the chat, but this is the address where you can go find it. Or just go to whitehouse.gov and it's the last thing they posted.
They also have a fact sheet of it posted that sort of breaks this all down a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll find it. Let's see. News.
So, Lisa, do I have to bring back those old apps that I did in the first Trump administration for people?
Oh my gosh.
I have to dust them off. They probably still work pretty well. All right.
Where'd it go?
All right, let's move on because I really feel like we probably have exhausted this topic for right now. If you're on this list and we're planning on traveling outside the country or you're currently outside the country, you need to have a conversation with an immigration lawyer very quickly.
There's also something that was announced with Harvard just a minute ago. I'll take a look at that. You guys can talk.
Okay.
So I actually have a question about it before we move on really quickly. The language where it's discussing the partial restrictions and it's discussing how the consular officer shall reduce the validity of non-immigrant visas issued. Is that indicating they're going to revisit the reciprocity schedule, or what do you all think that means exactly?
I think that means that they're going to approve visas for a shorter time period.
Okay.
Yeah. Which does impact the reciprocity schedule because that's where those time periods come from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
but no one with an already issued visa needs to be worried about their time being limited.
Well, if you leave and you have an already issued visa, you can't come back in.
Right.
The ban is having a visa in your passport. This is an entry ban.
Actually, Greg, the thing that was announced about Harvard tonight is a presidential proclamation that essentially enacts the DOS cable that we learned about last week that tries to stop people from coming in to the United States to do anything at Harvard. but this one specifically says this. The entry of any alien into the United States as a non-immigrant to study at Harvard under F or M status, or to participate in an exchange visitor program hosted by Harvard under J status is suspended and limited, subject to Section 2 of this proclamation, and it'll expire in 6 months.
Wait, so is this a are they doing this under 212F, or what is the what's the basis for that one?
Let's see. Let me go back up here. It says yes, 212F and 215A.
Yeah. Good luck.
And then
the first order, the travel ban, the big one, can be defended because that's essentially what Hawaii versus Trump was about,
right,
in the first administration. But this specific ban to Harvard is going to be left out of court.
And they're talking about potentially revoking visas from people already here who are at Harvard in F, M, or J status.
Oh, Lord.
It shall not apply to any alien who enters the U.S. to attend other universities.
All right. Here's my 2
Sorry
second
to hijack things, but.
Well, all right. So here's my 2-second advice on that. Don't do anything.
Yes.
Don't act. Don't make travel plans. Don't suddenly apply to another school or take a job that's not the job you want. Don't do anything. Give Harvard a week. And in a week, this will all be a memory on there. This is one there that Harvard is, first of all, Harvard's won every single thing that the administration has tried against them on there. So there's no reason to believe. And this is probably going, so what's going to happen is the Harvard lawyers are going to go into court probably tomorrow. And they are going to, the judge who has just handled the last thing where they tried to ban all international students by taking away Harvard's ICE certification, CVIS certification. It's going that same judge, this is probably going to be considered related, the cases, meaning that if it's on a similar subject matter and a judge was already working on another issue, which he is, because that's a temporary restraining order, that case is not over. So that same judge, I don't remember if it was Judge Murphy, I forget which judge it is going to get this case. And that judge is probably going to be mad. And that judge is probably, last week it was, maybe 75 minutes, 80 minutes that it took after Harvard went to court before they had a TRO. I am betting they break that record this week. So my guess is by tomorrow night, this is going to be history. I haven't even read the executive order yet, but if it's based on 212F, I can tell you that that's not what 212F can be used for. So this is just the revenge tour continued.
Yep.
All right. Well,
anyhow.
All right, good times. But I don't. Where is it? You got that by email, because it's not showing up under.
The Harvard thing is also under proclamations. It now is right above. It came right after it.
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna screen share that right now.
I'm trying to get this into an email.
There we go. Admission into the United States to attend, conduct research, or teach other nations. Yeah. I don't know why they think that this is going to, when they just tried this last week, this exact same thing, and were laughed out of court by the judge, why they think just putting it under a different section of the act is going to make him happy, when he said that this was all generated by animus. And that's, by the way, that's a killer on this. Animus, for those of you who don't know what the term means, it's in legal terms, it means they're using bad faith. They're doing it basically just to be jerks. And that's a reason why normally when if somebody normally couldn't fight something that was done administratively by the government, and you can demonstrate that it was done with animus, a judge can basically undo things that normally they wouldn't be able to do. Including a travel ban. And so that And the other one, they made a logical argument to, and it was similar bans in the past were upheld. So one can make that argument, but this one about Harvard is basically cruelly about just trying to pester Harvard. I think they know in the White House this thing is not going to last a day.
Oh my God. Sorry, I have to stop reading.
Okay.
They keep putting more things up on the website. Every time I go back to find something, there's something else there. But this one is not immigration related. It's dumber
All right.
than
We're only going to talk about immigration right now.
Yes.
The fact sheets of these issues too. They have a fact sheet posted on the Harvard student ban, and at the end they include quotes from Trump about the issues.
All right, I'm making another banner.
They said these concerns have compelled the federal government to conclude that Harvard University is no longer a trustworthy steward of international student and exchange visitor programs.
Okay.
President Trump wants our institutions to have foreign students, but believe that the foreign students should be people that
This
love our country.
is about Barron Trump not getting in.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's about Trump not.
I'm not saying he didn't get in because I don't know. I've just read it on the internet.
Yeah. They said they denied that he even applied.
Okay. Well, there you go. I'm sure Harvard has no. They're going to have to really scrounge to come up with the money to defend this.
I think that's actually their goal is to just try to bankrupt Harvard, but you're going to be working a long time because they've got a ton of money.
And their legal team basically right now isn't billing that many hours because they go into court and they win immediately.
Let me just say, and I know I said this last week too, but I just have to again give a shout out to Harvard's legal team because I know those people really want to sleep. I know they really want to sleep and not in their offices. And I know that's what they're doing right now is they're taking like little cat naps in their office and they're just working around the clock for their client. And I just have mad respect.
Which firm is it?
I don't know.
I hope it's one of the firms that that Trump tried to Wilmer Hale or one of those Boston firms that Trump tried to also do an executive order against because that's sweet revenge for them.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but whoever it is.
Quinn Emanuel.
Oh, okay.
All right. Were they banned?
No. Not
to
my knowledge.
I'm sure they will be. All right, law students, remember that firm. That's a good one. Put that on your interview list. All right. Julia, what else do we have to talk about?
Should we move on to the class certification in the Siskind case? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
The El Salvadorian prison.
Yeah.
Melissa, what's happening in that case?
So, there had been a lot of, flurry of activity on that case. And for those of you, this is the case that's pending before Judge Boasberg.
Mega
that
prison.
is challenge.
The mega prison.
Yeah, that is really challenging the removal of all of the Venezuelan men who were removed to the horrible Siskind prison in El Salvador. And this case has been going on pretty much since the moment those removals came to light. And this is the case where there's been a lot of factual discovery about the government and kind of the underhanded way that they went about removing and like renditioning these men to this horrible place. Today, the judge certified the class of people who are suing or like who are being sued on behalf of. And so what that means is that the judge has acknowledged that all of these men, even though the facts of their individual cases might be different from each other, that there's a class of them that all have similar claims. And to require them to challenge all of this separately would just be, improbable, right? It just wouldn't serve the interests of any one person to challenge, especially the constitutional claims that are really at issue here. So he certified the class. And then interestingly, while he did find that the United States does not continue to have constructive custody of these men while they're in El Salvador, meaning they're not really in the U.S.'s grasp, which is unfortunate that he made that finding. But at the same time that he did that, he told the government that within a week, by June 11th, they have to facilitate a plan for these men to be able to file habeas corpus petitions for themselves, and just as if they would have, and these are his words, had the government not provided them constitutionally inadequate process. So he really found that the government was wrong, like way wrong. And if you read the beginning of the decision, he actually goes through a giant paragraph from Franz Kafka's The Trial, and shows the absurdity of what the government was trying to argue in this case, which is like, we have the ability to send anybody we want to any place we want with no warning, and they can't challenge it. And if they were going to challenge it, they needed to challenge it in the last place that they were. But we didn't tell anybody where they were, and we didn't give anybody notice that they were about to be taken out of the country. So they didn't really have time to do that, but that's what they should have done. I mean, like, all of this crosstalk that the government's engaged in, Judge Boasberg is just not having it, and told the government today they have a week to allow these men a way to sue.
I want to show you something funny about Judge Boasberg. Hang on a second. I'm going to show you this because this is we had Judge Boasberg in our K1 case, and this is the decision from the Milligan versus Mike Pompeo. Remember Mike Pompeo? Whatever happened to Mike Pompeo?
I don't know. Blocked him out.
We missed him. We miss him because Marco's so much worse. But he did our whole. This was a travel ban case, and this was about K1 visas. And in that case, he was quoting Romeo and Juliet, and gave the example of the star-crossed lovers on there before he really laid into the Trump administration, and said it and gave a win to all of our clients in that case. That was a COVID ban. But Judge Boasberg is the best on there. That's all I have to say on that. He's not always fast as far as coming up with a decision, but boy, is he thorough about the way he goes about the process, and his decisions are really nice to read. So
yeah, no, this one was a good one, and so that happened today, this afternoon. So hopefully these men get some justice, and some of these guys can win their cases and somehow get back. Now, one question we raised in prep for this call, as we were seeing the travel ban and that Venezuela is on the ban, is how if a judge orders it and they have to be brought back to the United States, or some number of them have to be brought back to the United States, the judge is going to have to then find that there is an exception, I assume. Because then,
but they're not. Would they really be coming in under any of the banned categories?
Well, they're maybe. I mean, right now, none of them have visas at all. If they were going to be issued immigrant visas, they can't come in on immigrant visas.
They would be paroled in.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe they would be coming on immediate relative visas as spouses of U.S. citizens or something. So conceivably, there is a way for them to come. But I think that the travel ban and the inclusion of Venezuela on that, potentially complicated.
Well, I think a judge would also say these people did not leave voluntarily. So you can't, you have to let them back in. Do not have clean hands.
Yeah.
Another concept. You have to have if you put somebody in the situation where they are suddenly banned from coming back in, you can't you can't make that argument. So we will see on that. All right, Julia, what else? I know we have lots of things.
We do. We have a few things. There was a CBS article discussing how the administration is considering a regulation that would essentially take away work authorization for asylum seekers.
Did you guys read that? I read that article, and I'm still not understanding how they think they can do that under the statute.
I'm not sure. The statute says that officers shall authorize the alien. It's not something they can just...
This is another one where this is sort of like an easy one for anybody who's going to sue on this issue, because when the statute is clear on something, you can't, I mean, that's a problem for the administration. If the statute is vague or gives them some discretion, that's different. Like parole, for example, has always been a tricky one because it's, it says the uses words case by case, and it's supposed to be very discretionary. But the work authorization, in fact, there's been a lot of litigation. There was litigation in the past where they they are now required to issue within 30 days after the EAD application gets filed for asylees because they lost litigation. I forget which administration it was. It was probably Bush 1. No, I mean the second Bush administration, on there. So that was because of statute. So unless he can slip this somehow into the budget bill and Congress changes the law, that's a loser if they're thinking about that. So anybody from the administration that's watching our podcast, because I'm sure that's like what they do on Wednesday nights. It's like don't get too worked up when you get sued on that one, because that would be coming. If you want to spend your efforts on things that you might actually win, that would not be the one to do it on.
Yeah.
Watchdog Group found that like over 77% of asylum seekers have their asylum applications pending for more than 180 days, and so are relying on work authorization from this to support themselves while it's pending.
I mean, I think ultimately the goal of this administration is to end the ability of people to have asylum. And so I think if they can't work while they're here, then why would somebody come here on a B visa and apply for asylum if ultimately their visa is going to expire, they can't work, and they can't support themselves? Unfortunately for them, the law says otherwise, and they aren't going to be able to show a valid reason for, flatly violating it, unless they're going to slip some provision into the budget bill or something. I don't know. But
realistically, this is going to just push people to, find other means of work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, that's not going to happen, because they're going to lose in get a temporary restraining order. So this is never going to happen. That's there are some that are like you worry about, and then that's not what I'm worried about. I really think that they don't have a decent chance. So.
Okay, well, moving on to something else then. Are we worried about the gold cards? Do we think these are going to happen?
I've said it on this podcast before. It's go for it, Trump. If you want, more ways to immigrate, make me happy. It's just the problem with that one is it's not really a gold card. It's more like a silver card, because you spend a ton of money on it and it really doesn't get you. First of all, we don't even know if it's going to get you a green card. It's probably going to be some kind of parole status, because he doesn't have the ability to grant green cards in categories that he creates for himself. Second of all, it doesn't get rid of the reason you would spend $5 million is because you have big immigration problems that need solutions. And this doesn't solve any of them. This doesn't get you around, the guy that you bumped off for Putin. It doesn't get you around, and most of the regular problems that you have. I think I've mentioned before, I've had a couple of clients in the last 2 or 3 years that had 9-figure 8 or 9-figure net worths. They could totally afford it, but they're not eligible. There are people in this country that have been here for many, many years that are illegally here, that are excellent entrepreneurs and have built up major companies for themselves, and they are completely without status on there, and they are not helping us.
I just had a thought on this gold card thing. The Stephen Miller branch of the world hated DACA because President Obama initially created it by executive order. He didn't create, it wasn't done by regulation. He didn't go to Congress, right? I mean, they tried to get the DREAM Act passed. We still are, theoretically. If Trump does this by proclamation, isn't it vulnerable to the exact same challenges that DACA was vulnerable to? It just kind of seems dumb to me
Well, he is trying to, there is legislation impending in Congress where he is trying to do this legislatively. I don't know if he put it in the budget bill or not. That bill is so big that, I don't know half the stuff that's in there, but that is right. It's subject to challenge. I'm not sure who would challenge it, because it's sort of like just on principle, people might challenge it just to mess with Trump. And there are genuine anti-immigrants who don't like any immigration program who might challenge it, but that one might actually, people might just leave it alone because they don't care on there. But you never know. Speaking of DACA, though, we have we announced this decision that had come out of the Fifth Circuit a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sending DACA back to the district court. And the good news in that case was that it seemed to direct the court to start allowing, except in Texas, basically the rest of the DACA program to operate as it did before the lawsuit started. So in theory, that was going to open up the door for new DACA applications by people who were too young to apply in 2018 when this case started. Have you guys heard anything about this since then? Because I think all it takes is the judge basically in Texas to implement the order from the Fifth Circuit, and then it should be we should be back filing DACA cases again for the first time in a long time for new people, not just extensions. And also, I think it means as well potentially DACA travel authorizations, which I'm sure the administration is not going to be happy about that at all. But I don't know. They're kind of in a bind, the White House, on DACA. It's a very popular program. They keep saying that they like it. Members of Congress keep saying that they don't want to kick out DACA recipients. So they might quietly, the White House, be inclined to just let things go back to the way it was so that it doesn't become an issue for them next year in the election.
I don't think they care.
You're probably right.
Stephen Miller has been working pretty much his whole adult life, because this came out in 2012, right? So he's been working for a long time to get rid of this program. I think what USCIS will do is just drag out. They're not going to take any action in relation to this court decision. I think they'll wait until the challenges get to the end of the road, and they'll only really act once there's some potential final decision. But hopefully this is, hopefully it's a bright spot. Look, if somebody could get DACA anywhere but in Texas, then that's Texas's loss, right? I mean, I spoke with somebody today about a nurse on DACA who works in Texas. Okay, well, if she's not going to be able to eventually to work there anymore, then that's one less nurse that's working in Texas and fewer Texas citizens that'll be able to get healthcare when they need it. So, let her go work somewhere else in the United States. If Texas
outside immigration, Texas is losing healthcare workers already.
Yeah. It's a big problem.
All right. So we had also news about the Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela humanitarian parole case that was in Boston. And it was very confusing. And Elisa knows that I was confused by it because Elisa was more on top of it and we had to kind of educate me a couple of days ago on what was trying to, the order of things in this case is very important on here. So this is a case that was filed in Boston. I forget the name of it. It is somebody like some Russian woman's first name Doe versus, I think, Gnome on here. I forgot the name of the case, but basically it was, there was some really good news in this case, like on Wednesday of last week or Thursday, Wednesday. It was like very late in the day. I think on Wednesday, I think it was the 28th. And basically what the judge, in this case, they were suing to block the end of the CHNV parole program. Plus, for the Ukrainians that have been subject to a block on benefits being adjudicated, it was also supposed to get that block lifted. And the judge issued an order that said, I'm certifying the class, the different classes, I guess, for this case, or the different categories of this class, and I'm going to bar the government from doing what it's doing in both the ending the parole programs and in stopping benefits for the Ukrainians who haven't lost their parole status but have this other problem. And all was good for a couple hours until the next night when the Supreme Court basically struck it down. It's a little confusing as far as the Supreme Court didn't give any reason. They didn't say whether it was based on procedural questions about whether the judge could do a national injunction or whether it was based on something they didn't like, thought the judge was not right as far as his legal reasoning for why he was making the decision in the first place, regardless of whether he had the power to do an injunction. We don't know because they didn't issue, they've been doing these sort of rulings without explaining anything. So that's that happened, and what we don't know, and this is Elisa what we were discussing, because I've had several, and I talked to you about one case, but I've had a bunch of others for Ukrainians who have immigrant visa, have adjustment applications pending, including diversity visa adjustment applications that have a September 30th deadline to get those adjudicated, and those cases are not moving. And my belief is that is, an order on forcing the government to continue processing on those cases is not in the same category as the parole part of the case, and that a judge, and my understanding since is that the judge has a separate order now on the Ukrainians. I'm not entirely sure of all the administrative history here, but my understanding is that those cases should be able to proceed with this judge's order as far as benefits applications like I-765 applications and I-485 applications and things like that are all held up right now for Ukrainians. So if you are a Ukrainian and you are subject to this and you have any news on your case, you see any movement, please let me know. I would love to be able to, because I'm talking to a lot of people and we're trying to figure out what's actually happening on that and whether further litigation is going to be necessary. But as far as I know, there hasn't been any movement on any of those cases since the judge's ruling the other day. So we will have to see. I think the administration is treating it right now as if the Supreme Court decision applies to all aspects of that case and not just the CHNV part. Okay, so that was news. Julia, what else?
Elisa, what's going on with the sanctuary cities? They published a whole list, and Shelby County was on it, which is where we are right now. But you mentioned they removed the list too.
Yeah. So apparently the National Sheriff's Association, so the list that was originally published, that the reason why Shelby County, Tennessee was on there and not specifically Memphis was apparently the list was compiled by sheriff's jurisdiction. I don't know why. That's one of the mysteries of life. But apparently the National Association of Sheriffs, whatever their national association is called, vociferously complained to the White House that that was unfair. It was making the sheriffs look bad because it wasn't the sheriffs that were making sanctuary city decisions. It was the mayors or the police, the police chiefs and stuff. And so they felt like that was improperly impugning sheriffs. And so lo and behold, not long after that objection was raised, the list disappeared from the government's website. So I assume that the government
spends as much time trying to actually run a good government as to punish other governments. This administration, we would be in much better shape right now as a country.
Was there any consequences for those listed on the list, or is there?
They always have consequences. And they go to court and they lose, so there's no consequence. There's short-term consequences, and then there's medium and long-term consequences.
Well, I think ultimately the
administration trying to intimidate these cities?
Yeah. Yes. That's really where it's a PR thing, right? They're trying to intimidate them to sign 287G agreements and, let ICE run rampant in their cities without any kind of
threatening to prosecute the mayor of Nashville right now.
Yeah.
For just doing his job as mayor.
For existing. So I think that that's really where this was coming from and trying to kind of shame these areas, these metro areas, and saying, oh, you're letting all the bad people in. It was interesting how both the Shelby County mayor and the mayor of Memphis, both responded. And I thought Lee Harris, the mayor of Shelby County's response was right on. And he was like, I really don't know what you're talking about. We just follow the law. And under Tennessee law, we can't be a sanctuary jurisdiction because then we'd be violating state law. So this doesn't make any sense to me. But we also value all of our residents. There was some backhanded response there, but yeah, that was a weird interlude from the past week.
Yeah. Okay, we're kind of coming to the end of our time, but I see this interesting question, and I'm curious too. Kind of going back to the travel ban that just dropped. What about people with dual nationality?
So the travel ban specifically exempts people who are dual nationality, where they have a nationality, like citizenship in a country that has a ban and citizenship in a country that doesn't have a ban, they are exempt from the ban. And this particular question is about which passport the visa's in. But that shouldn't matter as long as you have both passports with you when you travel, the one with the visa in it and the one that shows that you have the dual nationality. You should be okay.
Okay, great. And then another quick question, an update on OPT for F1s.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the main thing I saw in the last couple of days is that there's some attempts legislatively to try, and I thought that there might even be something that they're trying to stick into the budget bill on OPT, but I'm not, I don't, there's nothing new that I'm aware of specifically on OPT at this point, other than the general news on Fs and the Fs that's happened in the last couple of days. Elisa, one question I had, we were talking about beforehand on Fs, Ms, and Js with respect to this extreme vetting order where they've suspended new appointments. We at this point have no indication that they have finished whatever that process is.
No, and who was I just talking about this? But there's been a lot of weird information coming through about it. We know of one person, for example, that was able to schedule an appointment for a J, but like not until November. So they were able to schedule something, but not for any time soon. And it seems, it was Megan that we were talking with. It seems like the administration, they said it would be a few days until they get this new policy in place, but it doesn't seem like they've listed the ban on appointments, but they're also trying to insist to the public that there isn't, a suspension of new appointments. And then, it was never publicly announced because we learned about this through a leaked DOS cable from Marco Rubio to consular posts. So the other issue is, I don't know that there'll be a public announcement when the appointments resume and like details on exactly what the new social media vetting is going to look like, because they're probably going to want to hold that information close to the vest. And they don't seem to be, they're only announcing things publicly when they really want to make a splash. So
there was something that Jonathan, well, there was some piece of news that we didn't talk about, which was this consular review case that came out of the DC circuit the other day, which was a great case on there. It was like the rare instance where now the courts have started to, there had been a trend for many years where the courts were giving a longer and longer leash to the Department of State regarding what's called consular non-reviewability, the ability to appeal decisions by consular officers. And the DC Court of Appeals, in one case, they said that somebody was suing over a visa denial, but their claim was based on a section of the Foreign Affairs Manual not being legal, that it was not, that section of the FAM that the denial was based on was not following the law. And that's a fairly massive decision, because that is oftentimes what these cases look like when you're suing over a visa denial, is that they are not following the law. You can do that. Now, if it's completely discretionary on their part and they're not arguing that the law is wrong, you're just saying that they were wrong on the facts, you're out of luck. Jonathan Wasden, my friend who's a really good litigator, had to say on this, on a post he put up yesterday, that this was probably going to affect the CVIS cases in a positive way, as far as making it making it possible to appeal visa denials under that. And I will say, on some news on our own case, we're one of the impact litigation firms that sued on behalf of 350 students. We accepted a settlement with the government today, and that's it's a little early to kind of report the details of that yet, because I don't think it's been formalized. But we will be we will be taking our plaintiffs and suing in a separate court in a new case, the State Department, over visa revocations. And I know we have a question that's right now from one of our viewers Pavitra was asking about. His visa is still revoked. Is there any possibility a revoked visa can affect your work eligibility now or later? The answer to your question is no. That as long as you're here, you should be able to, and your CVIS should be reactivated, and you should be able to get OPT the same way you did before. However, I think this DC Circuit case may be good news for people as well to get their visas potentially reinstated. So keep an eye on that. If you're an F1 student, that there may be some good news about possibilities of visas being reinstated because of that court case. And I don't think I have anything else on my list. I'm not, and you guys are silent. Nothing. Otherwise, it's 5 minutes of 8, and or 3 minutes of 8, and we can dismiss class a couple of minutes early. But somebody had asked whether there was changes to naturalization processing and times, and happily, that's one of the areas that's seemingly been left alone. I'm jinxing it by saying that, but for right now, it seems like processing times are still normal, and the process is still pretty much the same process. So not too much messing around yet with naturalizations, thankfully.
Fingers crossed.
All right. That is it. Okay. Well, we'll see you next. Well, actually, is next week AO? Oh, no, we have one more week before the AO conference. So
yeah.
I'm not sure. I will probably be back next week. I'm not sure which combination of lawyers will be on the live stream, but we're all going to be going to Denver the week after for the big annual immigration soiree, the ALA annual conference, where we have several speakers, and we're in the exhibit hall with the AI stuff and all that. So if you're an immigration lawyer watching, please come by and say hello in the exhibit hall. And that's it. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.